This is my Ricoh GR, and the positive film effect on this is just... And this is the Ricoh GR3. While it still has the positive film effect on it, the look of the filter has changed. So in this video I'd like to compare the look of the positive film effect between these two cameras. Before I dive into the comparison, I'd like to tell you a bit about my personal love story with the Ricoh GR and the positive film effect. I will show you some example images that I've taken over the 7 years that I've been using the GR, and I've chosen examples that really show these nice colors that the positive film effect produces. Of course you can skip this part and go right to the comparison. So this is me in 2015 on a trip to Southeast Asia, which was the first trip that I took the GR on as my only camera. Ever since then, the GR has always been with me. I don't really use the GR for street photography, but more as a general snapshot camera. It comes with me on every trip, and I've never worried about the dust issue, nor about breaking it. When I spent some time in the USA, I took my Nikon DSLR alongside my Ricoh GR. But my favorite images from that time were taken with the GR and the positive film effect applied. The GR has allowed me to take photos when photography wasn't the main focus. And being very unobtrusive, the GR is great for shooting people too. Then of course there are the countless bike trips I've taken the GR on. I carry it in this ugly little hip pouch. This allows me to draw the camera and shoot one-handed without stopping my bike. At camp, I then download the pictures to my phone with a small SD card reader. And with the amazing colors from the positive film effect, I can share them immediately. So I hope this gave you a good impression of why I like this camera and the positive film effect so much. All of the images that I've shown were taken with the 2013 model of the Ricoh GR, and had these custom settings applied to the positive film effect. I personally like the look of high contrast, but for the comparison I'm using the default settings for the positive film effect on both cameras. So for the comparison I just walked around my neighborhood and tried to find scenes that had color in them. I used the same manual exposure settings on both cameras, and immediately you can see that the GR3 exposes darker. I think this difference stems from the high key low key setting that the GR3 has, but I will talk a bit more about that later in the video. So one thing that becomes really apparent in this image is the higher dynamic range that the GR3 offers. In this left picture, the sky is really blown out, while in the right picture we still have good detail. For this scene I forgot to turn off the peripheral illumination correction on the GR3, which makes the right image look even darker. So this image I find quite interesting because the differences between the cameras are quite pronounced. To me, the GR3's image looks way more neutral with less saturation and less contrast. Another thing that I noticed is that the positive film effect of the original GR has much warmer midtones than the GR3. This, combined with the increased contrast and saturation of the original GR, gives the images more pop and makes them more interesting in my opinion. In this image especially, the output of the GR3 looks much more neutral and dull to me. One thing I forgot to mention is that I shot all of these with auto white balance, so some of the differences you're seeing might be originating from that. So in this scene I pointed the camera straight into the sun, and again you can see the higher dynamic range of the GR3 by retaining more detail in the sky. But another thing I wanted to mention is the very noticeable difference in green use between the two cameras. The green tones of the original GR are much closer to what I expect from film than what the GR3 delivers. And here we have a dark scene where the difference between the cameras is quite pronounced. The image coming from the GR3 looks flatter, and I believe this difference lies in the tone curve that is applied in the positive film effect. My guess would be that the GR3 has a nearly linear tone curve, while the tone curve of the original GR is somewhat S-shaped. Okay, skin tones. So skin tones definitely look better on the GR3's positive film effect. The effect on the original GR always produces very pale looking people. But unfortunately I can't show you any more examples, as I don't have any voluntary models that are willing to hold still long enough. And finally I have a few additional shots that I took in P mode. The exposure is the same, or at least very similar, but you do the math. So basically that was the comparison, and I already know which positive film look I like better. But just to make it fair, I adjusted the settings on the GR3 to make the images look closer to what I'd expect from the original GR. I will briefly show a few of the previous images before and after those adjustments. So here's another example with the default settings on both cameras, and then with the settings adjusted on the GR3. Again, before the adjustments and then after the adjustments. One more with the default settings, and then with the custom settings on the GR3. Default settings and custom settings. And here's the last one I wanted to show you. And to me, with the custom settings, this goes from a flat looking image to a somewhat interesting looking image on the GR3. So that basically concludes my video on positive film on the GR3 versus the original GR. And I for myself have decided that I'm going to sell the GR3 and keep my original GR. While the GR3 has obvious advantages on paper, like better high ISO performance, IBIS, and a higher dynamic range, I still very much prefer the look of the images I get from my original GR. The main reason why I prefer positive film on the original GR is because the images have more character. On the GR3 they've made the effect more neutral, and with the dynamic range of the latest sensor generation, it takes away some of that character. But of course all of that is just my personal opinion, and you may actually prefer the more modern looking images you get from the GR3. I will put a link to the images that I've shown in this comparison in the description, so you can look at them in higher resolution. Let me know what you think. Do you prefer positive film on the older GR or on the GR3? Also, if you have any suggestions for custom settings on any of these cameras, I'd be curious to know. While recording for this comparison, I noticed something strange. My GR was exposing way darker than the GR3 was, and I think it is the ND filter that is randomly activating. In my experience, these weird little bugs are a certain sign of imminent death. Unfortunately, this GR isn't the first GR that has died on me. But as I enjoy this camera so much, I always keep a replacement ready. Okay, one more thing before I go. In my early days with the Ricoh GR, I didn't trust the in-camera JPEG engine, so I tried to create a Lightroom preset that mimics positive film. I don't think it is as good as the actual positive film effect, but if you want to give it a go, I will put a download link to 2 versions of it in the description. Okay, bye.